The morning sun cast a warm, golden hue over the rugged peaks of Mount Whispering Pines. Claire, a spirited young woman with a passion for adventure, couldn't suppress her excitement as she tightened the laces of her hiking boots. The mountain, named for the towering pine trees that seemed to whisper secrets to each other, was a haven for hikers seeking solitude and breathtaking vistas. Little did Claire know, her quest for solitude would soon turn into a desperate bid for safety. Claire had meticulously planned her solo hike, mapping out each trail and campsite. She admired the way the morning mist clung to the evergreens, creating an ethereal atmosphere that was perfect for her photography. Her camera swung gently around her neck as she stepped onto the trailhead, taking a deep breath of the crisp mountain air. As she ventured deeper into the heart of Mount Whispering Pines, Claire marveled at the symphony of nature around her, the chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves, and the distant gurgle of a hidden stream. She was no stranger to hiking alone, having trekked through various landscapes, always seeking the thrill of discovery and the peace that came with isolation. The trail was challenging, but Claire moved with practiced ease, her eyes scanning her surroundings for perfect shots. Occasionally, she'd pause to capture the way the sunlight dappled the forest floor, or the graceful arc of a deer leaping through the underbrush. It was during one of these pauses that Claire first noticed it, a set of footprints imprinted in the soft mud beside her own. The prints were fresh and unmistakably human. Claire's initial surprise quickly turned into curiosity. She reasoned that other hikers must be sharing the trail, though she hadn't seen anyone at the trailhead that morning. She resumed her hike, trying to dismiss the nagging feeling that something was amiss. Yet, as she ventured further, she couldn't shake off the sensation of being watched. The whispering pines seemed to murmur secrets just beyond her comprehension, and the footprints seemed to appear more frequently, always trailing behind her own. As dusk began to fall, Claire set up her campsite, her mind still preoccupied with the mysterious footprints. She reassured herself that Mount Whispering Pines was a popular hiking spot, and it wasn't unusual for paths to intersect. But as Claire zipped up her tent and settled down for the night, she couldn't ignore the unsettling quiet that enveloped her campsite. It was as if the mountain itself was holding its breath, waiting for something, or someone, to emerge from the shadows. Unbeknownst to Claire, her solitary journey was about to take an unexpected turn, and the secrets that the pines whispered were darker than she could have ever imagined. The dawn light filtered gently through the canvas of Claire's tent, dispelling the unease of the previous night. She stirred, stretching away the remnants of fitful dreams. She rose with determination, eager to explore the stunning landscapes that Mount Whispering Pines had to offer. After a quick breakfast, Claire disassembled her campsite and stowed her gear in her backpack. She decided to start the day with a trek to a nearby waterfall, which, according to her map, was nestled in a secluded spot a few miles away. As Claire followed the trail, her senses were alive with the beauty of the mountain. The path was lined with wildflowers that swayed gently in the breeze, and the distant roar of the waterfall beckoned her forward. When she arrived at the waterfall, Claire was struck by its serene beauty. The water cascaded gracefully over a rocky ledge, creating a misty spray that sparkled in the morning sun. Eager to capture the scene, Claire set up her camera and began to take photos. It was then that she noticed something odd. Amidst the natural splendor, a piece of bright-colored fabric was caught on a nearby bush. Claire approached and disentangled what turned out to be a scarf. It was soaked and slightly torn but seemed oddly familiar. Claire's mind raced as she tried to recall where she had seen it before. The realization struck her suddenly. It was identical to a scarf she had lost on a previous hike, months ago, on a completely different mountain range. Her heart pounded with a mix of confusion and déjà vu. How could her lost scarf end up here, miles away from where she had lost it? Her sense of unease returned as she tucked the scarf into her bag and tried to focus on her photography. Yet, her hands shook slightly, and she couldn't help but glance over her shoulder more than once. Resuming her hike, Claire tried to shake off the unsettling feeling. But as she continued her journey through the Whispering Pines, she found more traces that sent chills down her spine. A candy wrapper she recognized, a footprint that seemed eerily similar to her own shoe size, and once, a distant echo of a melody she had found herself humming the day before. Claire's excitement for the hike was now overshadowed by a growing sense of dread. The footprints from the day before seemed less innocent now, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was not alone. As she pressed forward, she decided to test her suspicions. Claire deliberately changed her planned route, opting for a less-travelled path that veered away from the main trail. She marked her detour with a small stack of stones and pressed ahead, casting anxious glances behind her. As the day wore on, Claire's detour brought her to a small clearing. Exhausted, she decided to set up camp earlier than planned. Her mind buzzed with unanswered questions as she pitched her tent. The whispers of the pines seemed more insistent now, as if urgently trying to convey a warning. As night began to fall, Claire's attention was caught by something that made her blood run cold. There, at the edge of the clearing, was another stack of stones mirroring her own, and beside it, fresh footprints that led straight to where she had set up her camp. Claire's heart raced as she realized that someone was deliberately following her, mirroring her every move. Fear gripped her, but she knew she had to stay strong. Whoever was stalking her through the whispering pines had just made their presence undeniably known. The mountain's secrets were unraveling, and Claire knew she had to uncover them before it was too late. The whispers were no longer just in the pines. They echoed in her mind, urging her to find out what lay in the shadows of the trail. Claire's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the footprints and the stack of stones. The eerie mimicry sent a shiver down her spine, and the whispering pines seemed to close in around her. Her solitude, once a sanctuary, had transformed into a terrifying isolation. With trembling hands, Claire quickly packed up her gear. Her mind raced as she considered her options. She could continue on the trail and risk encountering her mysterious pursuer, or she could venture off the path in an attempt to lose whoever was trailing her. The latter option was risky, but Claire's instincts screamed that she needed to protect herself. Choosing a direction that veered sharply away from her original route, Claire plunged into the dense underbrush. She moved quickly, her senses heightened by adrenaline. The sounds of the forest seemed to grow louder, each rustle and snap amplifying her fear. As Claire forged her path through the wilderness, she took care to mask her tracks. She walked on rocks and fallen logs, doubled back on her own path, and even waded through a shallow stream. Every so often she would pause to listen, her heart pounding in her ears. Hours passed as Claire maneuvered through the forest, her body growing weary from the relentless pace and constant vigilance. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Claire knew she had to find a place to rest. She chose a secluded spot nestled between large boulders and, foregoing a fire, wrapped herself in her sleeping bag as darkness enveloped her. Despite her exhaustion, sleep was elusive. Every sound in the night seemed to signal danger. Claire clutched a small pocket knife, the cold metal offering a sliver of comfort against the unknown. The night dragged on, and just as the first rays of dawn began to pierce the darkness, Claire heard it. A faint rustling, footsteps approaching cautiously. Panic surged through her veins, but Claire knew she had to act. Silently, she slipped out of her sleeping bag and crouched behind a boulder, her pocket knife gripped firmly in her hand. The footsteps grew closer, and Claire could barely make out a shadowy figure moving stealthily towards her makeshift campsite. Her heart hammered in her chest as she prepared to confront her stalker. But then, something unexpected happened. The figure paused, seemingly aware of Claire's absence from her sleeping bag. The seconds stretched out like an eternity before the figure abruptly turned and retreated hastily into the forest. Claire, still crouched and hidden, felt a mix of relief and heightened fear. The stalker was cautious, maybe even experienced, and it was clear that she wasn't dealing with a mere opportunist. Whoever it was had been deliberately tracking her, and now knew that she was aware of their presence. Determined and fueled by a newfound resolve, Claire knew she had to turn the tables. It was time to stop being the prey and become the hunter. She had to find out who was stalking her and why. With the first light of dawn casting long shadows among the whispering pines, Claire set off in the direction the figure had disappeared. Her fear was now accompanied by anger and a desperate need for answers. The chase was on, and Claire knew that she had to unravel the mystery before it consumed her. The whispers of the pines seemed to urge her on, and she steeled herself for whatever lay ahead on the shadowed trail. Dawn unfurled across the expanse of Mount Whispering Pines, casting the forest in hues of gold and amber. Claire, her resolve steeled, tread carefully in the direction her mysterious stalker had retreated. Her senses were on high alert, scanning the terrain for any sign of the elusive figure. As she moved forward, Claire noticed subtle signs that indicated her pursuer's path: a broken twig here, a faint footprint there. Her previous experiences in tracking wildlife during her hikes were now serving her well. Yet, she couldn't shake off the eerie feeling that the roles had reversed, and she was now the hunter in this dangerous game. Claire's journey led her to a steep incline. The trail here was rough and treacherous. With determined steps she ascended, her eyes constantly scanning her surroundings. As she neared the crest of the hill, she noticed a small, dilapidated cabin partially concealed by overgrown foliage. Approaching cautiously, Claire could see signs of recent activity, fresh footprints leading to the door and the faint smell of wood smoke in the air. Her heart raced as she realized this could be the hideout of her stalker. Summoning all her courage, Claire stealthily moved towards the cabin. She peered through a cracked window and her breath caught in her throat at what she saw inside. The room was adorned with various items that sent chills down her spine: photographs of her previous hikes, maps outlining trails she had taken, and even personal belongings she had lost or left behind on her trips. It was an obsessive shrine, a testament to prolonged surveillance. Claire's fear was now tinged with outrage. She needed to unmask her stalker and put an end to this nightmarish pursuit. Her hands clenched tightly around her pocket knife. She carefully pushed the cabin door open. The interior of the cabin was dimly lit, the air heavy with dust and the musky scent of neglect. Claire's eyes darted around, taking in the details: a makeshift bed, a table cluttered with maps, and in the corner, a figure hunched over, seemingly engrossed in something. Claire's heart pounded loudly in her ears as she stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "Who are you?" she demanded. The figure jolted in surprise, turning to face her. The dim light revealed a man, disheveled and wild-eyed. He stammered, taken aback by Claire's confrontation. The cabin seemed to close in around them as Claire demanded answers. The man, caught off guard and seemingly frightened by her assertiveness, began to unravel. He spoke in fragmented sentences, revealing an unhealthy obsession he had developed for Claire after spotting her during one of her hikes. He had been tracking her ever since, collecting mementos and following her every move. Claire, repulsed and horrified, backed away, her mind racing with thoughts of escape. The man, realizing that his secret sanctuary had been violated, lunged towards her in a desperate attempt to regain control. Adrenaline surged through Claire as she dodged his advances and sprinted out of the cabin. The chase had taken a perilous turn, and Claire knew she had to reach safety before the obsessed stalker could catch up. As she plunged through the dense forest, the whispering pines seemed to guide her path. Claire's breath came in ragged gasps as she pushed her body to its limits, the need to survive eclipsing all else. The pursuit was relentless, but Claire's determination and intimate knowledge of the terrain gave her an edge. The whispering pines bore witness to her desperate flight, and as the distance between her and her pursuer grew, Claire knew she had to find help soon. With this realization, her resolve hardened. She would escape this nightmare and ensure that the stalker could never terrorize her, or anyone else, again. The shadows of the trail were about to be exposed, and Claire was determined to see the light of safety once more. The forest seemed to stretch endlessly before Claire as she sprinted through the underbrush, her breath ragged and limbs aching. The sounds of pursuit were growing fainter, but Claire knew she couldn't afford to slow down. Her stalker knew the woods almost as well as she did, and any hesitation could cost her dearly. As Claire navigated through the labyrinth of whispering pines, her mind raced to formulate a plan. She needed to find a way to signal for help or reach a populated area where she could find refuge. Her thoughts flashed to a ranger station she had seen on her map, located several miles to the east, If she could reach it, she might be able to find assistance. With renewed determination, Claire altered her course, aiming for the ranger station. She knew the path would be treacherous and winding, but it was her best hope for safety. As she ran, she used every trick she knew to cover her tracks and confuse her pursuer. She broke branches to create false trails, doubled back on her own path, and even crawled through dense foliage to mask her scent. The hours seemed to blur together as Claire pushed herself forward, the adrenaline and fear propelling her onward. The whispering pines seemed to echo her urgency, their rustling leaves a chorus of encouragement. As Claire neared the location where she believed the ranger station to be, her heart sank. The station, which was meant to be a haven, was eerily deserted. Panic clawed at her as she frantically searched for any sign of the rangers or communication equipment. In her desperation, Claire's eyes caught sight of a flare gun mounted on the wall. Her heart leapt. It was a long shot, but if she could send a flare into the sky, there was a chance that someone might see it and come to investigate. Without wasting a moment, Claire grabbed the flare gun, loaded it, and rushed outside. She aimed it towards the sky and pulled the trigger. The flare shot upwards, its fiery tail illuminating the twilight forest in a burst of desperate hope. Claire held her breath, watching as the flare reached its peak and began its descent. The seconds ticked by, each one an eternity of anticipation. And then, in the distance, she heard the unmistakable sound of an approaching vehicle. Relief washed over her as she realized her signal had been seen. As the vehicle, a Ranger Jeep, pulled up to the station, Claire collapsed to the ground, exhaustion and relief mingling in her tears. The Rangers, alerted by the flare, were quick to assess the situation. They immediately radioed for additional support and set out in search of the stalker. The nightmare that had unfolded on the trails of Mount Whispering Pines was swiftly brought to an end. The stalker, disoriented and fatigued, was apprehended without incident. The Whispering Pines, once a backdrop to Claire's terror, now stood sentinel to her deliverance. Claire, shaken but unbroken, knew that her ordeal had changed her forever. The mountain had tested her, but she had emerged resilient and resolute. The shadows that had pursued her were dispelled, and she found herself surrounded by support and safety. As the events of the day settled around her, Claire knew one thing for certain. She would return to the trails again. The Whispering Pines, with their secrets and shadows, were a part of her story now. She would face them again, not with fear, but with a newfound strength that could not be shaken. In the aftermath of her harrowing ordeal, Claire found herself at a crossroads. The trails and mountains that had once been her solace had transformed into a stage for her darkest fears. Yet, amidst the echoes of her traumatic experience, Claire discovered an unyielding resilience within herself. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of investigations, therapy sessions, and media inquiries. The story of Claire's encounter on Mount Whispering Pines sent ripples through the community, sparking discussions on safety, solitude, and the sanctity of personal spaces. Claire, despite being shaken, became an unexpected advocate for safety in outdoor pursuits. She collaborated with local authorities to improve surveillance and emergency response mechanisms in remote hiking areas. Her experience served as a catalyst for change, and soon the trails became safer and more welcoming for everyone. But Claire's personal journey towards healing and redemption was far from over. The Whispering Pines beckoned to her, a call that was both haunting and familiar. She knew she had to face her fears and reclaim the sanctuary she had once found in the embrace of the mountain. One crisp morning, armed with a resolve that had been forged in the fires of her ordeal, Claire laced up her hiking boots and set out for Mount Whispering Pines once more. The trail, so familiar yet irrevocably altered in her memories, stretched out before her. With each step, Claire could hear the whispers of the pines, like old friends welcoming her back. As she ventured deeper into the forest, the shadows that had lingered in her mind began to recede. The mountain, with its rugged beauty and timeless solitude, seemed to acknowledge her fears and envelop her in a gentle embrace. Claire realized that her connection to this place was unbroken, merely transformed. The hike was cathartic, with every footfall Claire felt as if she was reclaiming a part of herself that had been held captive by fear. By the time she reached the summit, her eyes surveyed the landscape with a mixture of triumph and reverence. The whispering pines swayed below her, their secrets and stories interwoven with her own. Claire understood now that the mountain was neither friend nor foe, but a constant, a testament to her own strength and resilience. In that moment of quiet reflection, Claire made a silent vow. She would continue to explore, to seek solace in the solitude of nature, and to advocate for the safety and sanctity of these sacred spaces. Her ordeal had become her catalyst, propelling her into a future where her love for the wilderness would be a source of strength, not fear. As Claire descended from the summit, the sun began its descent too, casting long shadows among the whispering pines. The mountain seemed to sigh, its breezes whispering tales of endurance and redemption. Claire's journey had come full circle. The trails of Mount Whispering Pines, once marred by fear, were now a testament to her courage. She emerged from the forest not as a victim, but as a guardian, a survivor, and an indomitable spirit whose echoes would forever mingle with the whispers of the pines. And so, the mountain stood silent witness to Claire's transformation, a sanctuary reclaimed and a spirit reborn. The whispering pines, timeless and enduring, continued their eternal dance, holding within their boughs a story of darkness, resilience, and triumphant return.